2, 1. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another exciting film journey here on Inside Movies Galore. I am one of your hosts. But tonight we are planning on eating our most favorite dessert while we're slumming through this one. Jake, I believe that this was your choice. Why don't you give us a little bit of a hint about what you subjected us to this week?
All right. Well, if you can't tell from that background there, we are kicking off our theme this year and hitting a bunch of franchises. And contrary to the picture that Brandon has decided to give us, we are focusing on the 4 core American Pie movies. And we will be kicking off with the 1999 film by Chris and Paul Weitz, simply called American Pie, which stars a whole bunch of up-and-comers who, at the time, for the most part, were fairly unknown, although a few were more established. Our main 4, you got Jason Biggs as Jim, Thomas Ian Nicholas as Kevin, Chris Klein as Oz, and Eddie K. Thomas as Finch. You've also got Sean William Scott as Stifler, Allison Hannigan as Michelle, Shannon Elizabeth as Nadia, Natasha Lyonne as Jessica, Tara Reid as Vicky, Mina Suvari as Heather, and a couple of adults. Jim's dad is played by Eugene Levy, and Stifler's mom by Jennifer Coolidge. Got some other fun folks in there too, but pretty good cast there. Like I said, most of whom went on to bigger and better things later on, and quite a few of whom stayed with the franchise for some time thereafter, as we'll see this month. So let's go ahead around the room and see if this is everyone's first slice of American Pie. I guess we'll start with you, Dave. You've been making a lot of comments. I'm curious what is behind them.
I feel like this franchise kind of like blew up during the Napoleon Dynamite phase of comedy. And I absolutely hated that movie.
Which, Napoleon Dynamite?
Yeah, Napoleon Dynamite is like the worst movie that you could probably put on my plate.
Well, yeah. I don't disagree.
But it comes from that line of a comedy, whereas like Van Wilder, that comes with some lighter comedy, and Nerds. I got into that. Police Academy is kind of along that line. National Lampoon, basically. And this is like, I would have to say, the second generation of the National Lampoon kind of movie. So that's where I'm coming from with that. This one I'm fine with. I'm fine with this one. Anything after it is bullshit. But, I mean, regurgitated, somewhat seems forced, the rest of it. And they're just doing the same jokes over and over, so. But that's how I feel about the franchise. But that doesn't mean that maybe I won't like one line here, one line there. First of all, not sure how I feel about Jason Biggs. He's kind of a dumbed down version of Adam Sandler. If you want,
wait, you said a dumbed down version?
Yeah, a dumbed down version. A dumbed down.
Okay.
And then it's Eugene Levy that kind of like sort of like brings the movie kind of out of its somewhat awkward moments. So actually, the awkward moments are the funny parts with him and whatever. But anyways, I liked this movie when it came out. It hasn't aged as well with some of the jokes. Like, I think the moment when they were streaming the darn thing online, they didn't have to go all the way out with that joke. But I guess that's what made it funny at the time. I do like what's her name, who was on Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Allison Hannigan.
Yeah, Allison Hannigan. I do like the chick that he has a crush on. What was it, Nadia?
Yeah.
Where she kind of like acted like a foreign exchange student or whatnot, kind of sort of. And Tara Reid, she's a hottie. And she kind of like floated the Sharknado series for a little bit. So
the other peak of her career.
Yeah. But I'm okay with this one, and I'm entertained with Stifler as the party dude and whatnot, and I get a kick out of the fact that which I'm sure we'll get into it. This isn't the first movie that's touched on MILF territory, so but I'm sure we'll get there, and that's pretty much all I'm going to say for right now. I'm sure we'll get into it more as we go. So, but yeah, I'm entertained by this one for the most part. I mean, I think what's his name came up with the potty dance. So,
okay, all right. So, how about you, Tammy? Is this your first round with this movie, and what's your take?
No, it isn't my first time with this movie. We actually watched these not that long ago on a different channel. So, but I will say every time I watch it, I sit back and think about, were people in high school really like this? And I'm trying to think of how I was in high school, and I'm thinking about most of my friends were guys in high school, and I'm like, did they really act like that? Did they really think that way? You know? I guess that's what makes it funny, because it's like every time I've seen it, I sit there and I think about it, you know? But yeah, it's amusing. It's fun, you know. I didn't mind watching it again. I'm not so sure if I've got the same feelings that David does for the other ones. I guess when I rewatch them, I'll find out.
All right. All right. How about you, Brandon?
Well, this is not my first time watching this film. And I mean, I watched it around the time it came out. I couldn't tell you whether I watched it in theaters or not. I don't remember. But much like the Scream franchise, it's one of those movies that came out close enough to where I was close enough to the age of the characters that it was oddly relatable, because, you know, I mean, it is a cultural time capsule of the era. I mean, shoot, this was the movie that coined the word MILF.
Yes. Well, it made it popular in pop culture, at least.
And then there was the whole. Then there, of course, then there's the whole Jason Biggs thing. I mean,
I think it started in The Graduate with Dustin Hoffman.
Oh no, the concept of the MILF has been around for decades, but the term was fairly new.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, if it was used before the movie, it was not used widely. But after the movie, it was very much used widely.
Oh yeah.
And it still is today.
Right.
I mean, shoot, I remember Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. One of the lines when they go to Jason Biggs, "Oh, you're the guy who fucked the pie."
Yeah.
But and I'll admit, I don't know Jason Biggs for a lot. Maybe what, Newsies?
What's that?
Wasn't he in Newsies?
I don't think he was. I know he did a few things. He did Anything Else, a Woody Allen flick a couple years later.
He played the Woody Allen character.
Right, which he did well.
Yes, he did. He did do that. So, I mean, to me, it's a nice time capsule. The soundtrack is one that really reflects that age.
Right.
Like I said, it makes me feel like I'm right back there. Has it aged well? Not particularly. Has it aged better than, say, one of the other films like Revenge of the Nerds, the original one? Yes, it has aged better than that one, but we're talking like over a decade difference.
Yeah.
But we'll go into more about that in a bit. Do these characters seem believable? Oh, yes. I've known plenty of characters like this when I was in that age group.
Mm-hmm.
But that's it for me.
All righty. All right. And I realize I neglected to mention what IMDb describes the film as, but it's very simple. 4 teenage boys enter a pact to lose their virginity by prom night. That is the plot in a nutshell. But this is a movie that again, like Brandon, I don't think I saw it in theaters, and honestly, I couldn't swear to it that I saw any of them in theaters. I'd have to check, but I couldn't swear to it.
What year did this come out again?
99. Which is one very interesting, weird bit of trivia. Mina Suvari, who plays Heather, starred in no less than 8 films in her career that start with the word American. 3 of them are part of this franchise, but 3 of them came out in 1999. She was in this movie, American Beauty, and the utterly forgettable American Virgin. And John Cho also was in American Beauty. So there is some people, I guess, were really feeling American that year. They were feeling patriotic. But anyway, I remember reading about this when it came out. I don't think it caught my interest, but it did catch my attention. I remember it got mixed reviews when it came out, but I was interested. I don't know how soon I checked it out, but I did. And we've already heard some comments from different people about different things. Dave, I'm going to have to disagree with you on the Napoleon Dynamite thing.
I didn't understand it either.
It's really, really weird. But in terms of the other comparisons, absolutely. Adam Hers, who wrote the screenplay, has gone on record saying that Vacation was an influence. I don't know that Revenge of the Nerds necessarily, but those 80s comedies, including the raunchy and sex-themed comedies, Porky's was definitely on his mind when he made this.
Oh, yeah.
Vacation was definitely on his mind. I believe he also mentioned the John Hughes films like Breakfast Club as being influences. What's that?
Or Kids in the Hall or 16 Candles.
Probably, yeah. Just generally speaking, those 80s comedies, but specifically ones like Porky's. He wanted to make a throwback to that story but one that would be updated to a modern audience, you know, at the time, you know, 20 years later, 10 years later. But also, he made a point of having much stronger female characters. And I think Brandon kind of alluded to the idea that this one aged better than some of those 80s movies. And part of the reason why is the girls are also very important characters in the franchise, and they're given depth. They're given, you know, and that's one of the reasons I enjoy it. But obviously, the four main dudes and arguably Stifler are the core characters. But you've got all these other strong characters as well. And then, of course, you've also got Jim's dad as a major character. And that's so it's balanced. There's a lot of different factors there. Yes, the film is raunchy. There are times I watch it and I feel a little dirty. And then today I was watching the commentary on it, and that gets pretty raunchy too. Not just comments, you know, that kind of thing, the background about it. But one interesting thing about the relatability, one reason why this franchise is very personal to me, it does hit uncomfortably close to home in areas that I'm probably not going to talk about on the air. But one thing where it does hit really close to home is that these kids are my age. This class was my graduating class.
Mine too.
These films. Oh, are you with us too, Kim?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Well, I have to ask your opinion in a minute.
See, I graduated in 90.
Yeah. See, this is my class. And so as these characters grew up in the movies, I grew up with them. And so it's it hits close to home for me.
What year did you graduate?
99.
90. Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was 97, so I was a little bit. They were a little bit younger than me, but hit right on the nose. Scream was right on the nose.
I was starting high school in 99.
So the other thing is that I didn't really know this before, and it's one of the reasons I was glad I watched some of the production stuff today. Apparently, even though this movie is fiction, Adam Hurst based almost all the characters and events on people he knew and things that happened in his high school. There were a few changes that were added by other members of the production staff, various actors, whatever. But the basic story and characters came out of Adam Hurst's own background. And so it's almost a remix of his life in a way. So I'm like, okay, that's cool to know, but that does lend a feeling of authenticity. I think even as weird and outlandish and crazy as some of this stuff is, most of it at least was rooted in reality. It's like when we did Joyeux Noel and they had the thing about the cat that was arrested for treason. That was actually based on a real thing, but you would never think that. You know what I mean? So it's like, I thought that was really fun to find out. Of course, the idea of, Jim's dad has the great line, "I never did it with baked goods." That was apparently more made up out of whole cloth, but apparently there was a story involving a grapefruit. So,
yeah.
So at any rate, but the other thing for me is just other things that I come back to this franchise for. The one thing, I think the first movie is the best movie. Dave is not wrong. The second movie in particular feels like a rehash of the first. And we'll get to those individually as we get to them. But the biggest thing that the other movies have that is minimalized in this one is I absolutely had a major geek crush on Michelle. I love Michelle. Absolutely love her. And she's a very small player in this movie, although she does have one moment that is classic and a couple other good ones. And Jim's dad. I just think even though Jim's dad is painfully awkward, Eugene Levy just knocked that performance out of the park. And he comes off as one of the best fathers in cinema, I think. Because awkward as he is, he means well, and he's entirely there for his son. And so he's like a major positive force in the movie. So I love Jim's dad. I love Michelle.
And you don't even see the mom at all.
You see her a little. She's more of a background. So. Yeah. But at any rate, and now it's kind of fun for me to go back and go, that whole from humble beginnings thing, because to think that when this movie came out and when American Beauty came out, no one knew who the hell John Cho was, but he put himself on the map with that whole MILF thing. Yeah. And now he's one of the biggest stars to come out of this movie. So it's kind of crazy when you think about it. But anyway,
I always think back and wonder, think back about the parties that I went to and stuff where they like these parties and stuff. It's like, how do I put this? I remember the parties. And even the parties that in this movie, a kind of different class than I was kind of in.
Yeah.
In school. I mean, I got along with everybody, and it didn't matter if they were jocks or preppies or whatever. Yeah. But the parties that I tended to go to were, we were all into like a little bit heavier music and a little bit more. Rock and roll, and there really weren't preppies at our parties. Not to say that I didn't show up at a couple of them, but I did because I did. But it was kind of a different class of people that are than what are in this movie. So that's not to say that I didn't know kids that were basically in that class, but
see, it was almost the opposite for me, because even though I'm not high class, I don't have the kind of money these kids clearly had. A lot of my friends did, and most of the parties I went to were very similar to this, but without the alcohol.
Well, I was a foster kid in high school, so I didn't have no money. But like I said, the parties I went to, a little bit different class of characters.
Yeah. Those parties,
they all had long hair, and all the guys had hair as long as all the girls, and heavy metal T-shirts, and
right.
Yeah. See, those parties, I looked, I was like, were parties really like that in high school? Because I'll tell you what a party was in my high school is they would go out to a empty parking lot with a keg and drink it off the back of a pickup truck.
So more like the end of Dazed and Confused kind of thing.
Yeah. So, and I never went to those because a lot of the people there were brutal and would break your arm if they didn't like you. So,
like a tailgating party.
Yeah.
Well, I went to some of those too. There was a couple house parties that I went to, and I went to more, I think, of the outside bonfire type of parties.
I did a couple of those. Yeah. So all right. So Kim, if you're with us, did you want to go ahead and give us, was this your first time with the movie, and what's your thoughts on it?
I'm sorry, say what again? I couldn't hear you.
I said, is this your first time watching this, and what are your thoughts on it?
God, no. I saw this movie the summer I graduated high school. I saw it in the theater.
All right.
But, I liked it. And I was telling Brandon when we were watching the other night, this movie, you were saying that we both said it's a time capsule because, all the music, the fashion, the hair, I think that it doesn't get enough praise because it is a coming of age movie. I think people look at the grossed out humor and how it's, kind of like about four boys trying to lose their virginity. but they don't see that they give just as much attention to the girls as they do the boys,
Mm-hmm.
and how each guy has their own hangups about, is this really what I want? Is this really that important? You know, it goes from being like, oh, we gotta be men, and then it's like, I don't care about sex. It's too much pressure, you know? And I'm like, wow, this is actually kind of deep and relevant.
Right.
I relate. I mean, I do relate hardcore to the movie. We didn't have quite as many wild parties like Stifler did, but we definitely had house parties where alcohol was present, just not dozens and dozens of kids. I was in marching band, and that whole thing about band camp being basically sex ed, hell of fuck yes, that's true. Everybody in my marching band was fucking, except for me.
Except for the flute thing.
No, and I played flute, and no, I never stuck the flute in my pussy. That would hurt, actually. That would fucking hurt.
Yeah, that was always my thought was, oh, that must hurt.
Marching band people are freaks. They horny as hell. They were all fucking in my marching band. Each other and other people, and cheating on each other and shit. But yeah, it felt like your typical American high school to me. And Brandon was saying, like, how did these four guys, how were they friends? Like, they probably grew up together. They probably known each other since grade school.
And Adam Hers talked about that. He said that the school he went to, they had cliques, they had groups, but they were not like clearly defined. Like you had the band girl, you had the band folks, you had the jocks, but they weren't like walled off, you know?
Yeah.
So
it's how my high school was.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of how mine was too. We had the cliques, but like when I just decided senior year, I'm just going to join the popular crowd, they let me. I mean, I kind of just said, you know, I'm going to start showing up to these things. And they were all like, where you been, man? You know, before that, I'd been hanging out with the comic nerds and whatnot, you know, and that's like, they didn't really care. So I liked that about my school. Unfortunately, everyone has a different experience, and my very same school went very differently for my younger brother than it did for me. But, you know, it's
which one?
The youngest one. Yeah.
David or Clayton?
The youngest one, David. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Clayton, well, we all had different experiences. But yeah, there were two of us that loved it and one of us that didn't. You know what I mean? So
yeah, my school kind of had the cliques and stuff too, and it wasn't like you said, totally walled off or what I mean. Like I said, I got along with everybody. You know, one day I guess the group I was in was considered the stoners. I guess, you know, the one day I'd have on the jeans and the heavy metal T-shirt and a little bit darker makeup. The next day I'd have on a cute sweater and jeans, and I'd look all preppy, you know, and nobody ever knew what to think of me, which that's what I thought was the greatest, because I could show up wherever I wanted, and I could hang out with whoever I wanted because I got along with everybody, and nobody ever knew what to think of me, so I got accepted wherever I went, and I thought it was just awesome.
Right.
Even the principal and stuff didn't know what to think of me. So
right. And actually one example of that in the movie that I didn't notice at first, and I don't know when I became aware of this, but I definitely noticed it this go round. One of the people in the show choir is John Cho. Like he is known as one of the MILF guys, but he's also in the choir, and he's actually credited twice in the credits because of that. But it's like, but they, you know, when Oz first says he had his sights on, you know, this untapped resource, you know, Stifler's like super dismissive of, oh, they're just these goody two-shoes choir girls, you know, and then, but like, but one of the people who frequents his parties is also part of the choir. So it's like there were breakdowns, although he did rather rudely turn the band folks away from his party. And I just love that part. He's like, what party? What party? And this guy comes up to him, party! Weird.
Yeah, that whole choir thing I never quite understood because they were
Yeah.
because it wasn't like, I mean, everybody seems to put choir in like with, say, Glee or something like that, like they're always the outcast. But my experience in every choir I've been in, it's been a mix of every clique.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, like we had jocks, we had the nerds, we had everybody in that area. They kind of just convalesced because, singing.
Well, like at our school, the guy who won Homecoming King was he was in the choir. He was an actor and an artist, and he was actually one of my art teacher's favorite pet students. It's kind of like, okay, not what you would have expected, but the and the Homecoming Queen also was very hippie-ish, I guess you could say. Not she was an athlete, but not like one of the marquee ones. I think she did volleyball. So it's like it's interesting how the stereotypes sometimes break down, but sometimes they're there for a reason and sometimes not. But anyway, Kim, was that all your
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay, cool. All right, so we'll launch into it. So the movie starts on an awkward note with our young Jim here trying to watch some, quote, illegal channels.
Good old days.
Good old days where even watching,
when your parents didn't know the sexy channels that were on at night were a thing for you.
Oh my God.
well, we're like, and I honestly, I can relate to this. I never was doing what Jim was doing, but the thrill of finding a piece of something that you knew you weren't supposed to be watching and you could almost watch it.
Yeah.
But
I think we've all, well, I don't know. Most of us probably had tried at least one point. But, well, my father had porn going on in the house actively, so I can't really.
That's child abuse.
at any rate, so we get our first experience with Jim and his parents, and from there, we meet the different characters, and basically, Jim is the sort of kind of doofy, nice guy, but not really. He's one of those guys who's not really definably part of any one particular clique. He's just kind of the guy that is like the friend kind of character, except that he's really the central character of the series. And then you got Kevin, Thomas Ian Nicholas, is much more cocky. He's more sure of himself. But on the other hand, and he's got a girlfriend, Tara Reid, the Vicky, who he's been with for some time, but he's becoming frustrated that they're not really sealing the deal, that like they're stuck on third base, as it were. And of course, she has this whole, I want it to be perfect, and I want to do it, but I want it to be perfect, that sort of thing. You got Oz, Oz and Stifler are the closest to jocks in the main cast. They're lacrosse players, they're teammates, they're buds. And Stifler is apparently buds with Kevin and Jim. He and Finch, for whatever reason, hate each other. They never fully go into why they hate each other, but there are reasons that develop.
It's plain to see that most of them are friends with Stifler mainly because they like utilizing his wealth.
Oh yeah.
To the advantage.
Yeah, I'm sure his parties also involved some quaaludes.
Stifler is filthy rich, or at least by East Great Falls standards. He definitely has money, and he has absentee parents. You meet his mom and his brother in this movie. I never knew this until today, but apparently his dad was going to be a major character in the second movie. and he was played by Chris Penn, and they did tons of scenes with him. And focus groups hated the character, and they cut him and redid that whole thing with his brother as a character instead. So it's like, okay, well, but it explains a lot of who he is. But basically, Oz is actually a really nice guy. He's just a jock. He's a big, beefy guy who's good at sports and not that bright, but he's basically a good guy. And they have an interesting dynamic with him and Stifler. And like I said, that's kind of how the four of them are able to go to all these parties, especially in light of the fact that the last one, Finch, is an oddball, an eccentric, proudly so. And again, he and Stifler do not get along.
We've all had that one guy that's always like acting extra mature in school,
right?
Who usually they were the ones with the super high IQ, so they were the oddball out anyway,
right?
So I mean, I knew a Finch in there. Matter of fact, he actually was going to be our valedictorian, but when he showed what speech he was going to tell, because he didn't want to be valedictorian, if they made him valedictorian, the school actually made him salutatorian instead.
Aha, I see how it is. Yeah.
But at that first party, one of my, I don't know why it sticks with me and makes me laugh, is when Stifler goes in there and you've got Sherman there. It's like, Sherman, what the hell are you doing here?
Yeah, well, that's not exactly what he says, but yeah, it's
What was the exact? I can't remember the whole, but it was just the way he said it.
Sherman, what the fuck are you doing here?
Yeah. And he just walks on by, but
Right. But yeah, it's and Sherman, of course, is sort of friends with them, but he's the really annoying dude that nobody really wants to own as a friend.
The Shermanator.
The Shermanator, yes. And of course, played by Chris Owens, who I can actually claim to have done a movie with him, but I cannot claim to have met him. I don't know if that happened or not, but he was a little kid when Major Payne came out. But he is kind of an annoying ass character, and sorry. Okay, sorry about that. But yes, we do have that first party where we're also introduced to Vicky's BFF, Jessica, who's played by Natasha Lyonne, and she's sort of the snarky best friend character. But she ends up, we find out later, enters into a business proposition with Finch that yields interesting results. And like I said, we do have that one scene where Michelle shows up at the door with her band friends and Stifler sends them down the road. We do have, various things, but I think the two main high points high points maybe not, but two main plot points from the party, or one being the whole pale ale incident. Example of the gross out humor in the movie. An example of where Stifler occasionally, despite being the popular kid, the jock, the guy that everyone wants to be like or to be, who's throwing all these great parties, Stifler gets humiliated at least once in each movie. And this was one of those times.
And much like in real life, that character becomes less and less popular as the movies go on.
Right.
To where he's pretty much the guy that nobody wants to invite to anything or do anything with by the end.
Right. Yeah, he gets really annoying.
Well, he's one of those guys. He's one of those people who peaked in high school. I mean,
Yes.
There's no question about that. He is one of those people. He gets a measure of redemption later on, but he definitely peaked in high school, and I've always thought Stifler was funniest in the first movie. Like I feel like he is one of the aspects that hasn't aged as well, mainly because he's so crude and so self-focused, but he's not complete ass, I guess you could say. Like, but in moments like the, again, he gets that one comeuppance at least per movie, which helps to keep him from being anything like a villain, if you will. But yeah, so there's that scene. And then there's the scene where Sherman seemingly hooks up with this very cute girl. And the next day, when the four main characters are sitting around kind of nursing their wounds about another unsuccessful party, the Sherman comes down with this girl, sends her out the door. They have this very almost tender moment. And as soon as she's gone, he turns around and starts bragging his ass off to the four guys. And they're all like, damn, Sherman, the Shermanator. We need to. Sorry about that. It's like, this will not stand. This cannot stand. We have to. And I believe that was the part where Kevin gives his big speech, right? His big stand up on the chair, impassioned speech about ending their virginity. And they end up making a pact to the next scene. They go to their hangout spot and they make a pact. Sorry, I keep I'm sneezing. I don't know where it's coming from all of a sudden. But anyway, what are y'all's thoughts on that first party sequence and some of those scenes we were just looking at?
I'll remember the beer scene for probably the rest of my life in that one. That stuck with me in a bad way.
You definitely didn't want to pick up any glass anywhere, right? And just drink out of it?
Right.
Well, I would never have done that anyway. I can't remember any age where I'd have just picked up any glass of random stuff I found laying around at a party and drank it. I mean, when I went to the few parties that I went to, the few frat parties or so on that I went to at Roanoke, which were very rare and very few and far between because I hated them, but I wouldn't touch any just random glass lying around. You don't know what was in that.
Right. Or how long it's been sitting around, or what have you. I mean, people actually, I can imagine Kim, I know you really are not interested in other people's germs. That must have been one of your particularly bad scene for you, huh? Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
Anyway, the I guess at this point we've met most of the main cast. Like, what are y'all's initial impressions of most of the main characters? Like, they anyone really jump out at this point? They're like
Well, I know that Tara Reid's character and her boyfriend, that was a typical couple during the 90s. A lot of them were saving themselves for like marriage and things of that nature. And A lot of times, you know, you wouldn't even get to second base in some relationships. So,
Right.
it was kind of a big deal if you actually got laid, you know. So,
Right.
at least among guys, and evidently that was something that during high school, guys always was like, "Dude, did you get laid? Dude, did you get laid? Dude, did you get laid? Hey, you were with that chick. Did you at least get to first base?" You know?
Yeah.
Right.
One of the things that my best friend in high school used to say every time is we would just be standing there waiting for the bus at it. And he would just do this whole nonchalant, like, "Hey, you getting any?" That'd be almost every day afterwards when our friend group would hang around waiting for the bus going up.
Okay. Yeah, and of course, like I said, Kevin and apparently Oz both are experienced enough that they've, quote, done third base. And we actually kind of skipped over. There was the scene earlier that kind of planted the seed, if you will, of the apple pie scene that came later, where Kevin's like, Jim is like, "What does third base feel like?" And then I think it's Oz. It's like warm apple pie, you know, and it's like, and of course that gets the wheels turning in Jim's head.
McDonald's or homemade?
Yes, exactly.
McDonald's or homemade?
Because
McDonald's apple pie back then was fried, so.
Oh man, the thing is now, and I know it was a little different then, but McDonald's apple pies are so friggin' tiny. It's like, what's he even thinking? It's like, but the other, so at the party, of course, Kevin has tried to do stuff with Vicky, and that yielded the whole. I think she gave him a blowjob, and that's basically how the pale ale was created, if you will. Finch, quote unquote, was going for a fashionably late entrance, where the next day he's like, "I was going for fashionably late, and when I showed up, all the girls were gone." Yeah.
Oh.
And Jim, meanwhile, this is where we really find out. I don't remember if it's where we find out, but it's definitely where we see that he has it bad for Nadia, the exchange student. Like, he has it bad for her. And he does have this total faceplant moment where he goes up to her and just starts laughing along with whatever joke she and her friends are laughing at. And you see that moment both in real life and in movies. It's always awkward. And it was awkward here. It was awkward. And that's pretty much Jim's role in life, is to be awkward.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and then you had that whole thing with Stifler that kind of put a damper on his evening. So in a way, Sherman almost comes off the big winner for the night, which is particularly galling to most people involved. Although, of course, later we find out that was all BS, you know. Much later, that sets up something that happens all the way at the prom, where somehow, in all this time, it never gets back to the girl what Sherman's been saying, until Vicky asks her point blank, and that's these things will always get back to the people involved, you know. But anyway, so we have, and I don't remember Kevin's speech, but the way they do it, this is full on 80s cheese, where you have this big inspirational speech, and he just goes on. What was it? I wonder if I can find that. Oh yeah, here, yeah. I'm actually not sure I want to read all of it. But he does have this great, we must make a stand here and now. And of course he ends with, we will get laid, and all the boys cheer, and that's all that fun stuff. So we then have them starting each of their own methods. Kevin goes to his brother for help, and his brother is a brief cameo by Casey Affleck, which is actually appropriate given things that happened in the subsequent years. But although it probably rubs some people the wrong way nowadays. But he is told about a particular book that they refer to as the Bible. And this was apparently based on actual Adam Hirst himself was in possession of such a guide that he said that they called it the Bible to make it less noticeable, less, what's the word I'm looking for? Less likely to draw attention, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Because they figured, who would care if kids were reading the Bible? And from that, Kevin learned certain things to use with Vicky to get her in the mood. Oz joins the choir and very quickly finds a rapport with Heather, Mina Savari's character. Finch basically tells Kevin, whatever you hear about me, agree with it. And Kevin's like, okay. And right away, this young, looks probably a freshman, comes up and asks him all this weird stuff. And at first, Kevin's like, no, are you kidding me? But then he's like, yeah, it's true. And we find out later that Finch paid Jessica to start rumors about him, which she happily did. And, Jim, meanwhile, finds a weird, unexpected in with Nadia, where she actually asks him for help with homework. And he invites her over, and Stifler tells him, you got to broadcast it over the internet. And you send me a link. And of course, Kevin and Finch hear it, and they're, Finch is like, I hate to agree with Stifler, but that's actually not a bad idea. I think Kevin says that's the best idea you ever had. So Jim tries to send the link to Stifler, to Finch and Kevin, and his dumbass accidentally clicks the link to the entire high school. And of course, this was back in the days where the internet was still fairly early days. It was still primitive. And obviously, it's pretty horrible video quality that's being sent over. But Nadia shows up, and he lets her change because she came from a dance class, I believe it was. He lets her change in his room and ducks out like a gentleman before hightailing it halfway across the neighborhood to watch with Finch and Kevin. And Nadia puts on a show. Not knowing that she is, but she definitely puts on a show. She actually sits down on Kevin's bed topless and starts going through his porn and enjoying it. And meanwhile, Stifler is watching it. His brother has joined him, and at one point says, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen, which for that kid probably was true. Well, we find out a lot of other people are watching too. We see Sherman watching it. We see this garage band. It's actually Blink 182.
Yeah.
Watching it with their pet monkey. We see a group of girls watching. We see a bunch of random people watching. And eventually Sherman calls and says, you know, this is going out over the net, right? And yeah, it was, but this was after Jim had already gone home and joined Nadia. And he develops a reputation because of the things that ensue, which, Dave, I believe was the title of the song you.
Yep.
Basically, finding himself face to face with the object of his desire, Jim is a little too eager and humiliates himself, unknown to it at the time, in front of the whole school twice. And yeah, it was interesting. He gets to school the next day and doesn't entirely know why everyone is making comments and putting up victory signs and all kinds of weird stuff.
Well, I mean, that's
even Stifler's brother was dancing his dance, which was hilarious.
Yeah.
I mean, this was the scene that probably holds up the worst out of the whole.
Yeah.
In one sense, it's nowhere near as bad as one of the characters raping a girl in Revenge of the Nerds.
Right.
But it's still, an extremely terrible violation of privacy.
Right.
I think it's offset a little bit by the fact that Jim himself does get basically punished for his transgression.
Right.
And also, now there is one thing that I do feel it would still apply to modern. I do think that modern high school kids would still do this.
Oh, yeah.
Today. I don't think that it is inappropriate in the fact that, they would never do this because they're so much more moral. No, it's just that it's definitely not a moral scene at all. It's definitely highly wrong.
Okay, Tammy, you told me that your school did a end of the year high school prank and shop. What was it?
Oh, our school had an area of the school that was basically surrounded by the school. It was called the quad, and there was classes on the inside, but then there was like a whole, I don't know, it was just, trees and junk in the, and they were surrounded by the school. And as the senior prank, the seniors went and dismantled the vice principal's car enough that they could get it in there and put it back together.
Right.
Yeah, he wasn't too happy.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Well, I'm sure that's the type of prankery that would probably have gone on in this time period of movies.
The other one that they did is so they let a whole bunch of crickets go in the quad. I mean, you walked into the quad, and anywhere you went in the quad, all you heard was crickets.
I know at ours, there was always a family of ducks in the pond right next to our school, so they let the ducks into the study hall. So,
all right, is that all it's quacked up to be?
I mean, it's harmless prank.
Yeah.
Well, there's a difference though between. There's a difference though between taking.
And I would have loved to have seen something like that in like one of these.
You broke up for that entire thing.
I didn't catch any of it either.
But there's a difference between, say, releasing crickets into a classroom and broadcasting a woman's nude, another student's nudes, a minor's nudes all over the internet. There is a huge difference between one of them.
There's a minor about what he did.
One of them is a prank, and the other is child pornography. And I don't know about you, but I think child pornography is not necessarily a funny thing.
I think more. I think also the idea, just like even getting away from that, but just the whole idea of a prank that does violate one's privacy, unknown to them, is definitely a little more potentially harmful. And we do see Nadia does pay for it because she is sent home. Her sponsors are very upset by this and send her home for engaging in this activity that she hadn't even planned on. And Shannon Elizabeth herself has expressed mixed feelings about this scene. She said that she's grateful for it because they really bent over backwards to make her comfortable. It was a closed set. Her boyfriend was invited to be involved in the production. Everything was set up to make her as comfortable as possible. And she credits this movie with giving her a lot of work she never would have gotten otherwise. But she also sees how it was problematic. So she has kind of mixed feelings about
I thought it was problematic when I was 17 years old and I first saw this movie, because I mean it's bad enough that he was broadcasting to his friends. I mean, that was just supposed to be his friends originally.
Right.
But then his dumbass sent out to the entire school. Now, first of all, you did not have that girl's consent to show your friends her tatas.
Right.
Like that was fucked up by itself. That was fucked up. And it's the same thing when Kevin and Vicky were about to do the deed, and Stifler's little brother was hiding in the closet, like, you're about to fuck, aren't you? And he's all pissed off. It's the same thing, sir. It's the same fucking thing. But you don't get pissed when someone does it to you.
Now, of course, in his case, he was much younger and more immature. He arguably had a little more of I wouldn't say an excuse, but Jim has less of an excuse than that little kid did.
Yeah,
but they're all. I mean, to me, that's the part where you say, "This is not a prank. It's not fucking funny. It was never funny." That was the part of the movie that made me go, "I know the fuck y'all ain't." And it just goes to show you how immature and dumb some men are.
But I do think that yes, that is something that is realistic for teens of that. Actually, not just of that current time too. They would do that stuff currently.
Oh, they do it nowadays, but nowadays they get charged with child pornography.
Yes, nowadays they will.
They actually catch charges. But you know what? The best payback on the best karma on Jim's ass is the fact that he got roasted by the entire school.
Yeah,
for being not even being a one pump chump. You didn't even get in to pump it. You're done.
It didn't even get to start. Yeah, it was just like touching her or seeing her.
Didn't someone call a Minuteman at one point? Like,
not even a Minuteman. Shit, come on, like a 10-second man.
Right.
But I'm like, that's your fucking karma for being a goddamn creep. No one's gonna sit there and be mad at Nadia. No. They're looking at you and calling you out your name and making fun of your ass for nutting on yourself twice.
Now, I will say that is one of the few things that doesn't redeem it entirely, but at least keeps it to where it holds up a little, is because he does pay
it balances
for
the
doing
scales.
it. Yes, he does pay for doing it.
And again, like Jim he does some really questionable things in the movie, but for the most part, yes, that's the other big scene with Jim that is interesting. The where
tell your mother we ate it all.
Yes, where his dad walks in on him performing the deed on a Costco pie, and it's and And again, that does set up one of my favorite lines in the entire franchise, where later on his dad is talking to him about, different things and and what a healthy young man might do or whatever. And then he just thinks, well, I never did it with baked goods. It's like, and actually that was one thing that apparently, it's weird because now Eugene Levy has become kind of the face of the franchise. Like he's in almost all the movies, even the ones that don't really count.
He loves that character, though.
He loves that character, but he did not. He was actually angry with his agent when he was first given the script. And apparently the Weitz brothers liked him enough. They grew up watching him on SCTV. Apparently they were willing to make him happy. They said, what can we do to make you want to do this role? And apparently Jim's dad was originally more of a pervy character. He was originally a little darker, a little more, I guess kind of, Kim, where you were implying that Jim was on his way to becoming, I guess you could say. That was apparently how he was written. And Levy basically said, look, there's good stuff here, but I don't like how this guy's written. And the Weitz brothers basically said, well, why don't you improvise? So basically, the vast majority of the scenes between Levy and Biggs are partially or fully improvised. A lot of it was either rewritten on the spot or straight up ad-libbed. And Levy took the character and made him his own. And it works beautifully. I think the father-son dynamic between them, I think, is one of the best parts of the movie, honestly. But it's, what's y'all's thoughts on that?
Eugene Levy is your Leave It to Beaver dad that's kind of like nerdy pervy,
Leave It to Beaver takes a whole new meaning in this context.
I like him better than Leave It to Beaver Dad. Leave It to Beaver Dad always looked like he was ready to pop his son one almost every day.
Supposedly the actor was.
Oh, well, there you go.
But yeah, I'm of the opinion that Levy is one of the best actors alive at awkward. He knows how to make awkward funny, I think,
Yes.
And he does. But again, he really gives Jim's dad a whole lot of heart that helps Jim himself to be more than just a lonely perv, like he is a lonely perv, but he's, you get that dynamic. And yeah, what he did, in fairness, it was Stifler's idea. Now, them all going along with it, that's on them. But yeah, that was definitely the kind of thing you'd expect a creep. Like Stifler is a creep. There's no, he's likable enough most of the time, but he is definitely the one major character who could be called a creep, I think, out of this group. Mostly because he really doesn't have the respect for other people that the others do, or at least not nearly as much.
He's one of them people that you love to hate.
Indeed, yes. Now, later in the series, he does grow a little bit. And again, one of my favorite lines in the whole franchise, we'll get back to this one when we do American Wedding, but the line where Michelle just looks at Jim thunderstruck, and she's like, Steve Stifler just gave a flower to a girl and meant it. This is huge. This is like watching monkeys learn to use tools for the first time. And it's like, I always love that. I'm like, that is true. He really, he grows a little bit as the series goes on, but he definitely starts off as borderline despicable character, and he does some nasty things in the franchise. That's for sure.
Well, from a girl's point of view, I would have been if I would have looked at him like, yeah, right, get lost, you know.
Right.
It's like, don't come near me even with a 10-foot pole, man.
And you do see some girls give him that look in the movie. Like when he's making the rounds in the party, doing his shtick,
Yeah.
some of them give him a look like, really? You know.
Well, yeah, he really.
You really think
like,
you're all that? Really? I don't think so.
Right.
I mean, as he walked into another room, he clapped a chick on the ass, and she was like, "Hey."
Yeah. And there's a part where he's like, "Vicky, Jessica, how's it going?" And he walks out of the room, "Bitches." But you know that Jessica has said much worse about him on a regular basis.
Man, if he would have done that to me and clapped me on the ass, I would have grabbed his hand and said, "Next time you touch me, I'll break it."
Right. Yeah. And then and of course there's no love lost between him and Heather. Like he meets her and he's like, choir girl chick, you know, like that was, he just definitely, they rub each other the wrong way, you know, just absolutely. But, and again, of course he and Finch don't get along, but you know, and of
but
course,
he does do a good thing though, because he does tell her, what's her name? Where to find Oz.
Yeah.
That he does do a good thing because she went to him and asked him where to find him, and he told her.
Right.
So that is actually something good he did.
Yeah. Like I said, you know, I don't think anyone in this movie is completely awful. Like, even, I mean, as annoying as Sherman is, he's not entirely awful. You know, he's just annoying as hell and does some really bad things. Lying about that girl was not a good thing. Although that does come and bite him in the ass at prom. So what was I was about to say something else, and that was there was one other character I was going to mention something on. One of the nastier things, we were talking about pranks earlier. Okay. So one established quirk of Finch is that he refuses to use public restrooms. And I got to admit, although I have never taken it to this extreme, I don't fully disagree with him. School restrooms are disgusting, you know, in most cases. I never nearly took it to the extreme he did of going home every time he needed to.
Well, I thought he would pee, but he wouldn't do, you know.
Probably. I don't know if they really specified, but
they said that he wouldn't take a shit in school.
Okay, so yeah.
That's exactly what they said.
That is what they said. I don't know if I ever really thought about whether that meant he would not. He probably peed, but maybe. But he definitely wouldn't take a shit at school. So Stifler decides to toy with him and feeds him a laxative, sticks it in his mochaccino. And there is a deleted scene where Kevin rushes to Finch, who's delightfully enjoying his mochaccino, and tells him, Finch, you need to go to the bathroom now. And Finch is like, what are you talking about? Stifler, he spiked your coffee. First of all, it's a mochaccino. And he never got to second of all. But they cut that out. But we do see that Finch is forced to learn. But Stifler takes it one further. He not only spiked Finch's mochaccino, he directs Finch directly into the girls' room. And that basically is the end of his reputation, his short-lived reputation. Jessica had already said, don't worry, that reputation of him isn't going anywhere. But I don't think even she knew how abruptly it was going to be ended. So,
no, in all fairness, it was because of Finch's, and I will give it this. It's one of the few times I actually would side with Stifler as, you know, I mean, it was one thing when they start these rumors, and I'll admit it was a brilliant plan because that is how things work in high school.
Yeah.
The rumor starts and it just goes all over the place. But when the rumor came that he was beating Stifler up, that is the perfect reaction to Stifler.
Yeah, because I'm like, oh, because I'm the one, he's the one that kicked my ass and everything, you know?
Right. Yes.
If I were Stifler, I'd be pissed too. I'm like, I know this punk ass, fruity looking bitch is not telling people he kicked my ass.
Right. And they never really clarify. I'm guessing it's because of Finch's quirk about not using of never going number 2 in school. But Stifler straight up calls him shitbreak. He doesn't call him Finch or Paul or anything. He calls him shitbreak. And so for him, that was the only logical prank to pull, I suppose.
Embarrass his ass like that.
Well, he did embarrass his ass and everything else too. But yeah, I'll admit it was a mean, nasty, underhanded prank, but it was not entirely undeserved. So yeah, I don't hold that one entirely against Stifler, but again, it's interesting. Sorry, got distracted. Yeah. So we had that going on. We had I think this was around the time that both Kevin and Oz had a little bit of trouble in Paradise too, because Oz has really been hitting it off with Heather, but Stifler was making fun of her in front of the lacrosse people. She asked Oz to prom, and Stifler, of course, is making fun of her, and Oz fails to man up and shut it down, and Heather sees from a distance that she knows what's going on, but she doesn't. I think she puts too much blame on Oz, and it basically puts him in the doghouse. And Kevin makes a stupid.
You hit it on the nose, though. You hit it on the nose. Oz didn't shut it down, so
he didn't shut it down.
He was partially to blame.
Oh yeah, no, he wasn't blameless, but she, again, typical high school. People will put way too much importance on things out of context or whatever. That's typical high school. Men, women, doesn't matter. They all do it. And similarly, Kevin makes a stupid off-the-cuff remark of something like, enough of this blowjob shit, I need to get laid. Something like that. That Vicky, of course, hears. And that doesn't go well. Yeah. Hey, Dustin. I guess we're pretty far into the plot, but this is the kind of movie where, at the end of the day, it's more about the characters than anything. So what are your thoughts? First time seeing the movie, and what's your thoughts on it? Dustin?
Me?
Yeah.
Yes. My audio did not work, so sorry about that. I missed everything you just said.
I was just saying, since you're with us, what are your thoughts on the movie? Was it your first time watching and all that?
Oh, no. I've seen this quite a lot of times. I almost didn't need to rewatch it again. I just sort of ended up doing that for fun. And well, I've seen it enough times. I ended up kind of dozing off a little bit, even though I do really like this movie. This is a pretty great like teen comedy, but it actually has sort of a positive message in there, despite all the wackiness. So about not having to do what you think is cool, or worrying too much about things that seem really important to you when you're a teenager. So it's a really just great series, at least the 4 main ones. And the first one, I think, maybe does it a little bit less well than some of the later installments. But overall, I really like this movie, and I think it's actually a relatively healthy thing that you could see as far as like crazy sex comedies go. So I first saw this when I was like 14, 15. I think it was on TV somehow. Edited down, of course. And I don't know, I just always kind of have like positive memories of it. I think I technically saw American Pie 2 before this one, and I kind of have I think I saw that one at kind of the right time when a lot of history was happening. So I'll get into that when we cover that one. But for now, this is a good movie that's just kind of part of that, stepping stone as you see these characters grow up. And, when you kind of grow up with these movies too, it's hard to put into words, but something about it is like, it's like nostalgic, but just a little bit deeper, I guess. I don't really know how to phrase it, but I'll try to have that figured out for next week. So,
good deal. All right. So, in terms of the story, we are basically getting toward the run-up to prom. And again, this was, I think the whole debacle with Jim and the whole Nadia thing was right around this point too. And we get to the, he's in class the next day, kind of just shell-shocked, I guess is a good way to put it, about how his life as he knows it is over. And
yes, the very illegal nowadays thing with the internet. Yep.
Yes.
So there's a lot of movies that have stuff like that does not age very well, and on the one hand, this doesn't age well either. But on the other hand, with the way it goes in the in-movie universe, you don't necessarily feel as bad because he does suffer, like, not legal consequences, but actual, like, consequences of some kind. Because in, like, a lot of the 80s movies, it feels like it would just be like a, haha, whoops, and nobody would ever mention it again. Whereas here, it's just, like, mortifyingly embarrassing.
Well, yes and no. As we get into the later movies, we see that in a sense, Jim actually may have come off karmically better than ever because of that debacle. Because the scene I was just about to get into is the one where he ends up, out of sheer desperation, Michelle is the only one talking to him. And she's just talking to him like normal. And he's like, wait, so you have no idea why I'm angry? And she's like, is it because we had a test? I always get really angry when we have a test too, something like that. And then he's like, would you like to go with me to the prom? Yeah. And so that's the part where their paths finally start to dovetail as a direct fallout of everything else that happened. But definitely then at that moment, he was feeling like shit. There are no two ways about it.
Like
Definitely.
how I like in a later sequel, like he's talking to his dad about something. It's like, oh, like the thing on the internet, and Jim's like, you saw that? Oh no, I didn't see it. It came up at a PTA meeting. What made it work?
Yes. I'd forgotten about that, but yeah, I can't remember which movie that was in. But the third one, maybe.
I think 2.
We'll find out. We'll find out soon enough. But so anyway, everyone in their own ways are doing a little worse than they were, but I believe this was the part where Kevin went to his brother and he found the book and he found out about the tornado twister and he decided to make it up to Vicky. And did he ever? And she had some fun with.
She forgave him pretty quick.
What's that?
She forgave him pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I find it hilarious that part where her father comes up there, is about to go into the room, and it's just and she's like, I'm coming. He's like, oh, okay, that's
right. He just turns right around and trots back down the stairs, you know.
Such a lucky break.
What's that? Yeah, that was
a lucky break.
That was. It's like one of the only times when you think about it, that's one of the only times in the series someone doesn't awkwardly walk into the room on someone else, you know? Because that keeps happening, you know? But it's... and then Oz manages to smooth things over with Heather. And so now we get to prom. And we have that nice little moment with Jim and his dad. I think that was the part where his dad said, you know, it's talking about, you know, I never did with baked goods. But it is the part where he's giving Jim this it's obvious what he's saying, but he's saying it in a very dad way. and it's just this nice, you know, moment between them. But of course, Jim has to remember his date's name. You know, after that night, he would have no trouble remembering her name. But at the time, he's like, Michelle. Yes. So they end up going, you know, they're at the prom. The worst band ever. Oh my God, the band was awful.
Yeah. Tell me about it.
I think on the commentary, somebody mentioned that the reason they went with like that theme for the prom, like band and stuff, was because that was their like high school theme, and they remembered how lame it was.
They wanted to go as lame as possible. Yeah, pretty much. And so you had that. You had you know, a few things happening here and there, but that's where Vicky starts talking to the girl who had spent the night with Sherman, and Vicky's like, so, you know, like being all catty, kind of, you know, conspiratorial, and the girl's like, what are you talking about? And then, of course, when the band goes on break, she stomps up to the stage and says, I want to tell everyone Chuck Sherman is a liar, and just goes off on him. Oh, and when he gets nervous, he wets himself. And then you see him in the middle of the dance floor pissing himself. And yeah, Sherman definitely does not come out the better for that lie.
I mean, honestly, when boys lie on girls like that, it pisses me off, because it's like the guys are looked at as studs and the girls are looked at as sluts.
Yeah. And
he knows what he's doing. He knows the hell he is damning this poor child to by lying on her. And the fact that she was nice to him. She went to prom with him. She was willing to probably date him. But no, he had to lie. He had to fuck it all up on his own.
Yeah. And again, the truth will out, as they say. Like, you know, he should have known better. You know,
You
like
can't treat women like they're just another notch on your belt.
right. Yeah. Well, he is the Shaminator, you know.
That's another thing to appreciate about at least the mains. I haven't seen any of the spin-offs, so I don't know what. I see 4 other titles on our thumbnail here. I don't know what's in any of those. But
There's actually 5 spin-offs on top of that, but
jeez.
yeah.
Well, anyway, like the women are like themselves are real characters too,
Right.
who are, respond to all the craziness and like bad behavior of the guys. So
Right.
at least that's something, right?
Right.
So it's kind of making me think of that little scene from Scarface where his friend's like, "Oh yeah, this is how you get girls," and he says something like really gross, and then Tony just like talks to the kid. It's like, "Watch, see my friend? He's gonna stick his tongue out of that girl over there. Watch what happens." And then she slaps me. So there, you see what happens. So there's kind of a "don't do this" message in there.
All right.
It ends up working out for them because they turn their behavior around, or just in some cases get lucky breaks. But I think it's kind of at least some degree of a positive thing to demonstrate to show that, you know, being a jerk doesn't really get you anywhere.
Right.
Makes sense.
And I think it was already mentioned earlier that as the series goes on, Stifler kind of falls from grace a little. Like, you know, he definitely is the cool kid in this movie, but not so much once they've graduated and started their lives, you know.
He's kind of always stuck there. Like, he does have moments where he matures in some of the later sequels, but he never really gets to where he should be.
Right. Whereas most of these others change a fair bit as the series goes on. Probably none more than Jim and Michelle, but some of the others do have some further growth in the later series. But it's, I guess, we're up to the big after party, which of course Stifler's hosting again. And basically all the guys end up kind of doing their own thing. We do have this scene first on the steps outside of prom where Kevin's whining. Kevin's a whiner. He really is. He's a whiner. That's probably one of his biggest flaws, at least in my mind. But he's kind of whining about how, you know, this isn't really going the way I thought it would, or oh no, first he had that cocky thing earlier where he was telling them all like, "Oh, well, you know, we're all what was he saying? Like, it's the big moment, you know, like, I know this is from Zombieland, this isn't from this movie, but like the phrase "nut up or shut up" comes immediately to mind. Like, Kevin's basically acting all like, I got this. Where are y'all at? Like, just not being a good friend. And then as prom doesn't go quite the way he thinks it will, he's got that scene later where he's sitting on the steps just kind of like, oh, well, it didn't, you know. But then they all buck him up and they all go off to the party. But actually, I like that first scene where because Jim gets angry with him and he's like, that's the part where he goes off about, you know, like, it's just sex, you know, like, yeah, I haven't even had it and already I hate it, you know. He's just like, he's like, I'm going to go hang out with that band geek because at least she has something else to talk about, you know. And
exactly, it's like stop trying too hard. Like, this isn't that important. Just let things happen naturally.
Right. Now, of course, when we get to the party, of course, you know, Kevin and Vicky have kind of made up and they find a room. Basically, Oz and Heather kind of find their way down to the lake. And Jim is just sitting on a couch awkwardly listening to Michelle, and he's like, do you have any stories besides, other stories? Like, she's doing all these band camp stories. This one time at band camp, and she's like, well, I do have one, but it's kind of dirty. And he's all ears. He's like really interested. And then,
Like,
of course,
all right, what do you got?
he's like, oh, this one time at band camp. And then she basically tells him a spin the bottle story. And then he comes back and he's like, so the end of the story is you end up kissing this guy. And she's like, yeah, and it was so gross and whatever. And he's just like, yeah, whatever. He rolls his eyes. And that's where she hits him with the famous line. And this one time at band camp, I stuck a flute in my pussy. And he does this huge spit take. And he's like, excuse me? And she's like, you think I don't know how to get myself off? I mean, that's half of what band camp is, a sex ed.
Well, obviously she
pretty
doesn't.
much. I mean, where's the fucking lie? As a former band geek, where's the lie?
Obviously she
And
doesn't.
then that's what she's like, oh, we go screw tune because I'm getting antsy.
She's more of a masochist in that.
Well, it's like
Not
you
masochist,
find out she's
a
like,
masochist, yeah.
Yo, sadist, almost.
that's
Inflicting
where the
pain on-
mask it's where the mask comes off, and you learn that she's a closet freak. It's like, and that's kind of
my name, bitch.
what's that?
When she's yelling at him, say my name, bitch.
And supposedly that was improvised. Supposedly it was like a running joke between her and Adam Hers, and she just randomly on the spot just added it in, and they were all like, holy crap, we got to keep this. There were a couple of things apparently that were accidents. Like I said before, Eugene Levy improvised a lot. The scene earlier where Finch was trying to leave on his scooter and it failed to start was an accident that cracked everyone up, and they're like, okay, we got to keep this in the final cut. There were a couple of happy accidents like that they kept. But yeah, Michelle saying, say my name, bitch, was basically improvised. So that was, and then of course the next day, we go to the next day. Oh, and of course Finch sees a sign that says do not enter, so naturally he enters. Yeah, naturally. And he finds Stifler's mom hanging off in the corner. And we, of course, have been introduced to Stifler's mom via pictures and via the MILF guys who looked at her picture, and that's a MILF, and that's, again, the popularization of the term dates to this movie. But he sees her, and they have a little tete-a-tete, and they and we hear Mrs. Robinson, obviously.
It's appropriate.
It is appropriate. And then the next day, we see Heather and Oz under blankets on the shore. We see Kevin and Vicky, waking up. We see Jim waking up next to I think it was a pool floaty of a dinosaur. And Michelle's nowhere to be found. And he wakes up. She used me. I was used. Cool. Because, honestly, with a guy, that almost would be less, it would be a very different thing than if it had been reversed. But for Jim, that was just the idea that anyone would use him that way, I guess, made him feel like he had something to offer after all. Of course, he finds out otherwise in the second movie, but still.
he was at least a good sport about it.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, with all of them, actually, I'll wait till you finish with that, then I'll come back because I do have a point to make, but it'll be after you've finished with all the stuff.
The other one, of course, is where Stifler forces open a door that doesn't want to open, and he's like, Mom? Shipwreck? And Finch is like,
Oh, hey, Stifler.
just face.
Oh my god.
And of course, that is something that gets into all sorts of legal ramifications as well. And apparently,
he could be 18. So I think he was 18. So
Yeah.
well, yes, but one of the reasons they don't show that, I'm kind of I think narratively it works better that nothing is shown. But one of the reasons they don't show anything is that Eddie K. Thomas was 17 when the film was made. He was the youngest member of the main cast. Most of them were older. Allison Hannigan, Tara Reid, Natasha Lyonne, I think Mina Savari were all in the early 20s. Shannon Elizabeth was like mid-20s, I think, when the movie was made. And Sean William Scott was a little bit older. I think he was like 21 or something. So several of them were older, but several of them were the right age. But Eddie K. Thomas was the baby. So that's one of the reasons why he is not filmed doing anything like that. But I also do think it works narratively that we didn't have to see it. Yeah. But Brandon, you can come back to your point. Yeah.
See, one of the things that sets this apart from a lot of those 80s raunchy comedies like Porky's and so on, I do think is that you do see personal growth for most of the characters. I mean, right. Kevin was this guy who was the one who everybody figured had it all together. He acted like he had it all together, and he had to come to grips with insecurity. And not knowing what's going on and not understanding things and realizing it's okay to deal with chaos. Like with his girlfriend, she wanted everything to be perfect. She wanted everything to be there. And she learned a lot of that things don't have to be perfect. And that's not how life is. Jem learned.
And he learned that too, because that was part of his problem with not being able to say he loved her.
Yep. Jem learned his own lessons. Oz learned how to be more sensitive. Understand? Right. I mean, he went from "suck me, beautiful" to being a lot more to having probably one of the most romantic sexual encounters in the movie. And if you notice that, he talked about, well, the sex wasn't that important to me in there. It was spending the time with her. And he wasn't bragging about the whole encounter at the end.
You didn't even tell them about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
and with Oz, it's actually left slightly ambiguous whether there was sex or not. Like, it is somewhat ambiguous.
So it was growth. I mean, for Jem, it was all about learning that there are consequences for your reckless actions. And I don't know how well he actually grew with it, especially considering the second movie. But, I mean, there was a part of him that I think did grow a little bit. But he grew the least, in my opinion, of all of them. With Kevin probably being right behind him. Oz being the one who had the most growth throughout the whole.
Right.
And Finch, maybe. Finch didn't really change all that much throughout.
Yeah. I think in this movie, they all moved the needle a little bit. Maybe not Stifler, but most of the others moved the needle a little bit. Some more than others. But yeah, I would say if we were looking only at this movie, Oz probably did move the needle the most, I think.
And that's where the second movie, as much as and we'll talk more about this next week,
right?
But this is where the second movie, though it is rehashing a lot of the same things, does act as an important bridge for the series to continue. Yes. Without the second movie, the third and fourth movie just really wouldn't hit the way they do. I really consider that. Really the first and second movie to be basically one large film.
So, yeah.
Or two episodes in a series.
Well, again, I learned a lot of stuff today I never knew about the second movie. And when we get to it next week, we can talk more in depth about it. But there were actually two major plot lines that were scrapped and redone, basically. And I think one of the reasons why the movie ended up feeling like a retread of the first movie is because they swung for the fences and failed, and it just made them gun shy, I guess, about trying to do that. I do think with the last two, they had a little more boldness in their choices, but again, we'll get to those when we get to them. And then basically, we basically have the wrap up where they meet once again in their little meeting spot. And once again, we haven't really mentioned yet, but there's this refrain throughout the series, but definitely in this movie of to the next step. You know, the whole, I think it was one of the movies, they all like, Kevin tries to do that and they're all like, shut up about the next steps. But they do
like a reunion, like when they're all like kind of older, like guys.
Yeah. But they're definitely in this one. It is all about, and I think that's one of the running themes of the movie is new beginnings and learning to take that next step, I guess you could say. And that's a big thing for that. That's Kevin's biggest thing throughout the series is learning to move on and move forward. But for all of them, that is a big thing they have to get to.
Do you think it would work to say that the first movie is about learning lessons and then the second movie is about cementing those lessons and like actually taking them like to heart?
You could say that.
Making changes around those lessons?
You could say that. I'm sure some critics would say y'all are putting way too much.
Because there are some points where it's like, oh, you have to learn that again.
Yeah. The now some of the, I think Brandon made the mention of he didn't know if Jim fully learned his lessons. Jim does do some things in the second movie and the third movie that makes you go, dude, really?
No, I do like how I do really love how the movie ends. The first movie ends just with him catching Jem actually and Nadia conversing over online and him dancing for her. And then, of course, his father deciding not to intrude upon it. And then as he's going down the hall, he breaks into the dance himself. I don't know why, but I love that little bit.
Right.
That's why Eugene Levy's character is, in my opinion, one of the best characters in the series as it goes.
Right. The well, I mean, again,
I watch a lot of movie reactions just as kind of like YouTube junk food, and somebody commented, "It's like, well, he has to get it from somewhere," and it's like, you know, I've never really thought about it that way. That moment does kind of show it's like, oh, maybe he was just the same kind of weird, awkward guy. I mean, he would have to be to have all those like talks, right?
Right. Well, I think he does at one point, and talk about awkward talks. He tries to tell Jim about some experiences he had with his mother, with Jim's mother. And it's like, Jim's like sitting there kind of like, I don't know that I really want to hear this. It's like, I actually, was that in this movie or one of the, I can't remember which one it's in. But anyway, he does do that. He does those kind of things. But at any rate, that pretty much does cover the plot. So did anyone have any final thoughts on particular characters or events before we move on into production?
Not that I know of. I think we've pretty much covered everything.
Okay. So one thing that
does have a cool period soundtrack, if that's what we.
Oh yeah.
Once we get the soundtrack or music, that'll be definitely talked about.
Yeah, we definitely mentioned this. There's some definite you got 1 Week by the Bare Naked Ladies in there. You've got a
Third
book.
Eye Blind.
What's that?
I think
Yeah,
there's a song by Third Eye Blind.
Yeah, we've got Third Eye Blind. We got Flagpole Sitta by Harvey Danger. We've got a song by Hole. We've got a song by Blink-182. We've got there's a lot of stuff that pretty much says, yep, this is the 90s. We got Everclear there. We got Tonic, Third Eye Blind. Yeah, Semi-Charmed Life by Third Eye Blind. That definitely helped. It's like, yep, that's 90s.
So since we skipped over to the soundtrack or to music, I will say that we talk about whether soundtrack works, which it does, but we also talk about how good a soundtrack is if you want to even listen to it on its own. And the as far as I'm concerned, the whole of it is great. I mean, I don't mind the soundtrack itself is something I would listen to on a regular.
I have soundtrack.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
and the movie.
Yeah.
What's that? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. What's up?
No, that's good.
Okay. And definitely, I will admit that is part of the nostalgia for me is hearing the music as it goes. There are certain songs and certain groups that I do tend to associate with this franchise. Of course, we've got music by David Lawrence, but I don't think the background music really caught my attention all that much. I don't know if y'all found it more noticeable. I think it's probably mostly the found music that really catches most people. But y'all let me know if you disagree on that. Notably, and this was one interesting thing that I was hearing when I was watching the bonus features, the movie was considered a relatively low budget movie. They made it for $11 million, which is not an extraordinary amount, and it made that back opening weekend. Apparently, its opening weekend in the US and Canada was $18.7 million. So the movie was profitable right away, but it was a July release. Originally, they wanted to dump it in February, and then it might have been a Valentine's release, And then they apparently the test screenings were so good. They were like, okay, we're going to do summer blockbuster release. And it worked. This movie ended up making almost 10 times its budget in the US and Canada. So that worked out for them. That's one of the reasons why we got a franchise out of it. But partly because of the low budget, one scene in particular I kept seeing reference to, and that is the scene where Jim and Nadia are in Jim's room. Apparently that set was in a metal garage that was very, very hot. And apparently Jason Biggs actually succumbed to heat stroke during filming that sequence where he's running back and forth because he was so overheated from being in that room that the running was just too much. So it's like, okay, well, that's good to know. But if you look in that scene, he and Shannon Elizabeth both look a little more sweaty than they probably should otherwise. And she just came from dance class, so it makes sense. But yeah, but that was apparently a budget thing. But overall, I think if this was a low budget film, mostly I don't think it's that noticeable. But I don't know. What do y'all think on that?
I'm not really sure where the budget would have gone in this, aside really from like licensing music and stuff, because there's just kind of normal stuff around.
Right.
I feel like the budget in this is the music.
Yeah.
The soundtrack.
I think you're right. they did build sets. Actually, the hangout spot where the guys keep meeting up is a replica of the interior of a restaurant called Yesterdog that Adam Hers he and his buddies actually used that as their hangout spot. He grew up in East Grand Rapids, I believe, and that's where the actual restaurant is located. But they built a set based on the restaurant, so they didn't have to disrupt business or anything.
Yeah, it's called Dog Years in the film.
Yeah.
So Yes Your Dogs makes sense.
Yeah. And and again, I mentioned before, but supposedly most of the main cast were based on his actual friends. And they're like they mixed them up. Like no one person is meant to be one person, but like he would take traits. Adam Hurst took traits from this guy and added a couple things, and then you got one character, that sort of thing. So it's kind of fun, and most of his friends know it. There was actually a little featurette where they all met at Yesterdog and were talking about him behind his back, which was kind of fun. So, any other thoughts on production and music? Okay.
I wonder I guess I hadn't really thought about like sets. Like I suppose they would have had to have had sets for some scenes.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times it seems like they were just filming like at a school or a neighborhood. Like it doesn't feel like they just went to real places.
There were 3 schools that they used for different scenes, and the house where Jim and his family live is an actual house, and they did film scenes in it. Although, again, they recreated parts of, like his room apparently was a set, but apparently for much of the scenes in the house, they just filmed in the house. So, yeah. I'm not 100% sure beyond that where the breakdown was. Like, I don't know if Stifler's stuff was sets or if it was actual locations, but would make sense if they did some sets, I guess. But like I said, they did the sets on the cheap, and actually they made comments about 2 things that I found kind of amusing. They're probably true. And one is that they probably would not have gotten away with making the movie even remotely with as little studio interference as there was if it had been a higher budget movie, because if it was a higher budget movie, the studio would have paid more attention and been more,
would have had more supervision.
Exactly. And supposedly the studio did mess one thing up. And I've always thought of this as a flaw of the movie. So it makes sense that it's the studio to blame. But apparently, according to what they said on the interviews, Shannon Elizabeth claims that she was talking with her boyfriend and was trying to affect a French accent. And he said, "No, man, that's a terrible French accent. You sound more Russian." So apparently when they did the movie, he's like, "You should play an East European girl." I don't know if they knew where Nadia was coming from, but apparently he pushed her to push for that. Supposedly she worked with a dialect coach and got the Czech accent down pat. And supposedly the studio didn't like it and made her fix it in post. And you guys probably know as well as I do that one of the main criticisms the movie had was, God, gee, it's such a horrible accent. It's not a believable accent. And supposedly that is the studio's fault. So it's like, okay. I don't know why they felt the need to change it in post, but whatever. I also like how the movie was originally submitted with the title Untitled Teenage Sex Comedy that can be made for under 10 million, which studio readers will likely hate, but I think you will love. That was the official title that they submitted it under. Then they changed it to East Grand Rapids High, then East Great Falls High, then Great Falls. And finally, I think it was the studio that picked the title American Pie, which is actually the title of a porn from the 80s. So, accident? I don't know. But, of course, it's also the title of a great song. But, that's probably what they were thinking. Yeah, whatever.
Whoever was in charge of the studio probably did not know about the porn thing.
Probably not. If they did, more power to them. But probably not. But, anyway. Let's go ahead and go into favorites. So let's guess we will start with you, Dave. Let's see here. Let's say favorite scene and or moment and or line of dialogue, favorite character, and let's say if you wanted to cover another raunchy comedy that we have not yet covered, what would be your first pick?
Okay. Well, my favorite character in here is, I would have to say Stifler.
Okay.
Don't know why, even though I know at the end of everything, he walks in on his mom and what's his name? For some reason, he's the life of the party, and he kind of reminds me a little bit of how Van Wilder was. And I like that comedy, and actually that's probably one of the ones that I would probably put for it, either that or The Girl Next Door.
Okay.
So either one of those two I would definitely put forward. Favorite scene. Oh geez. How about when everybody's having sex and what's her name, Megan? Both of them just smash things in the room. I don't know why, but that just I got a chuckle over how they just kind of meshed the whole.
Michelle, yeah. when they were breaking everything, yeah, that was pretty funny.
That's all Michelle.
Yeah.
They just turn it on. It's clear like a child's room. It's like, this'll do.
He jumps on the bed and bounces right off.
And it's like they mesh everyone one sexual escapades together, like kind of like for some reason that whole
the setting reflects their personalities.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Alrighty. All right. How about you, Brandon?
Well, favorite scene, I don't really know. Maybe it's that whole thing at the end where you see it all wrap up and you see Jim dancing for Nadia, and then Eugene Levy does his little dance at the end, deciding not to barge in on him this time.
Yeah.
As far as there's actually, as far as those sex comedies, there's a part of me that would love to go back and review some of the ones that I haven't done it. I'm actually right now I'm divided between three things for my month in like November or December, or some 1 month later on when we do it, like the Nerds series or Porky's, or even reviewing Clerks and Jay and Silent Bob, those films, which I would consider those sex comedies in some way.
Yeah.
Maybe not Clerks 3, but definitely Clerks 2, and definitely Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. Those would be raunchy comedies in any sense. But yeah, I mean, I'd say any of those 3 series would be fun to revisit. I know when I do a franchise thing, it'll probably be in that one of those, my later one, not my first one.
Okay. All righty. And Kim, if you're still with us, why don't you go ahead and give your favorites?
Yeah.
Damn. Favorite character. I mean, I probably not Vicky. What's her friend's name again?
Jessica.
Jessica. I like her because she has that I don't give a fuck attitude.
Right.
You know, like basically she's too cool for school, but you're like, this is a girl who's probably friends with everyone and friends with no one at the same time. So I think that's why I like her. So I'll say she's my favorite character, and I wish Natasha Lyonne had more screen time. I mean, she probably did have more screen time, but it ended up on the cutting room floor probably. Favorite line, shit. Probably the one that I kept laughing at the most because it just was like the way that Sean William Scott said it was that he's walking around his party and he's like, "Sure, man, what the fuck are you doing here?"
Yeah, I always love that.
That was pretty funny. I remember that Sherman kid from a movie called Angus. I don't know if any
Yes, I loved Angus. That was one of my favorite movies growing up. But yeah, that it's just such a douchey fucking thing to say.
Right.
I would say the Stifler is probably my second favorite character, mainly because he's an unapologetic asshole, and everyone knew a Stifler in high school.
Yeah.
Everyone knew a Stifler. Stifler is that guy that no one really likes that much, but they're friends with him because he's rich, or he throws the best parties, or he has access to alcohol, or for whatever reason, you know.
There's some useful quality. Maybe not redeeming, but useful.
Useful,
Right.
exactly. So,
It's probably better that he thinks you're his friend rather than somebody he'd like bully.
yeah, exactly. But other than that, like, yeah, those are pretty much my favorites, I'd say.
Okay.
Did you have a raunchy comedy that you would like to throw out as one that you would love to revisit?
A raunchy comedy to revisit. Eurotrip, definitely.
Scotty doesn't know.
Oh my god.
Best cameo ever.
My stepdad fucking loves Eurotrip. Particularly the Scotty doesn't know scene. It's like as the song goes on, it gets worse and worse, and he's like, "Damn, that poor guy." I did her on his birthday.
Right.
Like, God damn.
One random thing I want to throw out. I wanted to throw out, and I forgot to. Sean William Scott, to get ready for the role of Stifler, supposedly he called up some of the people he hated in high school and just talked with them. And he wanted to, I guess, find out why they rubbed him the wrong way or whatever. But he also took some of that and used it to help make the character. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of a fun.
Perfect.
You know, presently, the character of Stifler kind of reminds me of the. Do any of you watch the Americanized version of Ghosts?
I haven't gotten to it.
Okay, well, there's a character on there where he just wears no pants and he acts like Stifler all the time.
Yeah.
I don't know. What are you talking about?
There was a UK show called Ghosts where there were all these ghosts that lived in a B&B, and the chick who plays in I Zombie plays in this Americanized version, and one of the ghosts is like somebody who acts exactly like Stifler, like who was the life of the party, but he was like a business executive, evidently in like college parties and whatnot. So
righty. So how about you, Tammy? What about your favorites?
Actually, my favorite character is Oz.
Okay.
I just I don't know. I think he's just he's trying so hard to be down to earth but he wants to hang out with the guys, but yet he really wants to like the girl, and he seems like a little bit more real than some of the other ones in some ways. Like he would really be thinking this. Somebody would really be thinking this way or feeling this way, or really be confused, or
He has the most like meaningful and sincere personal growth.
Yeah, I guess
Yeah.
you want to say it that way. Um, my favorite scene, the apple pie.
Oh my
Uh,
God.
He
Yeah.
just comes in like, but it's not what it looks like.
I'm trying
I
to
don't
understand
remember.
why.
I don't remember the last time I saw this before we saw it on the other channel. But I remember when it got to that scene the last time I watched it, I just sat there and looked at it and went, "What is he doing?" So yeah, that's definitely my favorite. That's my favorite scene.
Okay.
As far as I don't know what a raunchy comedy. I mean,
Oh, come on. You know a good run. Animal House, PCU, Van Wilder, How High.
Encino Man.
That's not a raunchy comedy.
Oh,
Porky's.
Porky's is definitely a raunchy comedy.
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
again,
I guess any of the Porkies is raunchy.
and again, Porky's was definitely an inspiration on this one. No
Yeah.
question.
I guess that.
Okay. Good times. How about you, Dustin?
Well, I think for my favorite scene, I think it would have to be like the internet broadcast, but not for like what's going on specifically with Jim and Nadia, for how it keeps cutting into just everybody like at home watching. Like for some reason, like the whole thing with like the guys with like the band and the monkey, like that just keeps like coming to mind whenever I think of this. It's like, hey, that guy's in my trig class. And he starts dancing. Other people are like laughing at him. And then it cuts back to them and they're like, all right, get in the mix. Come on. They're kind of into it, like cheering him on.
Go, Trig Boy.
That's your birthday.
And the monkey's getting into it too.
Yeah. Well, they're all enjoying his dance.
What the fuck are you doing?
All right.
The fucking sandstorm or whatever that is. And for characters, I mean, it is kind of hard not to pick Stifler just because he's hard to ignore. Like he drives a good amount of the plot just by being there. Like, because I mean, it's his party, and a lot of the stuff that messes them up kind of involves him. Like when Heather overhears like Stifler like talking about her to Oz, like that causes a problem there, and he crashes like Finch's reputation. Like it's easy to pick him, but I think I want to do something kind of different and go with Jim's dad as the. In his review, Ebert called him the world's most understanding and supportive parent.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, some of the stuff he does, like where he like sits down and like brings him and like shows him like the magazines. My dad actually did do that for me, and that was maybe one of the less messed up things in that area. It was not good. It was awkward and bad, but I don't know. He felt kind of realistic in I don't understand what's going on, but I'm going to be a good guy way. a good guy about it, and I'm going to be like helpful instead of make this worse, which is not who either of my parents were. So I think I
Your
maybe
mom ate it all.
what?
We eat the pie. We'll just tell your mom we ate it all.
Right.
And just like just his delivery on that. We'll
Right.
just tell your mother we ate it all.
Right. Yeah. All right.
Knows he's got a weird ass son.
And
I did almost pick that because I still laugh about like a lot just thinking about it. It's not what it looks like, and just the look on his dad's face. Oh my god.
yeah.
McDonald's are homemade. Like there's so many good lines. In it. It's really hard to just pick one.
Yeah. Apparently, they did inquire about McDonald's, and McDonald's would not give them permission, so they went with Costco. But,
Wow.
but anyway, did you say?
You could just buy a pie from Costco and like
Right.
say it's not. I mean, it's a pie. They don't all look different, you know.
Right. Did you say what monster comedies you wanted to look at?
I don't know if this would fully count or not, but Kentucky Fried Movie had some pretty wild segments in it.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Like that whole Big Jim Slade thing, where he just like bashes through the wall and like the Kool-Aid Man. Like, what was that? Like, it happened so quickly. Like, I am somewhat obsessed with that. It's just that was so weird. What's happening?
We have to cover that one of these days. That one and the boob tube. Both of them are fun.
Right. I need to. I don't know if I saw Kentucky Fried Movie. I don't think I did.
It's basically a bunch of skits. It's by John Landis. It's basically a bunch of skits similar to that like porno thing in American Werewolf in London, which is also on its own incredibly hilarious. It's like, you promised you'd never do this sort of thing again. After the big guy like breaks into the room, and like the dude, I promised you no such thing. Not you, her. I've never seen you before in my life. Oh, I'm sorry. And he just turns around and calmly leaves. It's like, what was that? What's happening?
I mean, the only problem with Kentucky Fried Movie is that it starts off as just a bunch of shorts and then ends as an extended short that basically is Enter the Dragon.
It does kind of run out of steam in the second half, but when it's hitting, it's really, really, really funny.
That's going to be a case with a lot of those variety kind of sketch comedy ones. Like Meaning of Life would be like that too. You get some scenes that are just absolute awesome, and some that are like,
Like the Family Guy joke, they forced her to watch the other 20 hours of my Monty Python stuff that isn't funny or memorable.
Yeah. Well, like with that one, I don't think the Mr. Creosote sketch is all that funny, but some people think it's hilarious. And it's like, but the Every Sperm is Sacred sketch, oh my God, that's gold. Anyway, so I'm going to say if I were ranking this is one of the funny things about both movies that you watch several times over your life at different points in your life, especially when nostalgia really becomes a factor. But also, this is something we're probably going to run into a lot this year when we're doing franchises, is that sometimes it's hard to base your favorite character on a movie because the franchise starts to change it. You know what I mean? And like, I think when I first saw this, I probably would have agreed that Stifler was one of my favorite characters. But I haven't felt that way for a long time. On the other side, I really like Michelle in this movie, but she only gets a couple moments to shine. But from the second movie on, she is hands down my favorite without question. But the one who probably was at the front from the word go would be Jim's dad. So if I'm basing it solely on this movie, it's probably Jim's dad. And yes, because he is awkward, painfully so. I would be awkward and embarrassed to have a dad like that. But on the other hand, he is so supportive and good and decent and tries his best, however awkward that might be. And I'm almost inclined to say that a lot of his scenes with Jim would be among my favorites, although most of them are so painfully awkward. But a few of the moments, like we'll just tell your mother we ate it, that's a great moment. The part where he's talking about putting on the corsage, that's a great moment. But again, that one off-the-cuff line, I never did it with baked goods, that is one of my favorite lines in the movie. And the one that's right up with that is the moment when Michelle takes off the mask and lets her freak flag fly. And Jim's reaction, like, what? Who is this guy? And it's when he realizes that his consolation prize is actually the jackpot.
I've been used. Cool.
What's that?
I've been used. Cool.
Yes.
That still gets me too.
Yeah, and the whole "say my name, bitch," that was a great moment. Like there were a lot of great moments there. It's like I said, she only had a couple scenes to shine, but she made the most of them. And the other one probably would be when Stifler walks in on Finch and his mom and faints out of shock. Shipwreck? I love that. Now, with the raunchy comedies, have we done Vacation? I know we did Christmas Vacation, but did we?
We've done Christmas Vacation 1 and 2. And
Oh yeah, I forgot. I
forgot we did 2. Oh my God.
No, we have not done any of the Vacation.
Okay.
Otherwise,
because that would definitely be something we need to hit eventually. But and Brandon already alluded to the fact that Kevin Smith straight up says in his movies that he's all about dick and fart jokes. Most of his movies would qualify, and it's hard to pick one. But I guess if I were to answer the question, I would go with 2 movies, a movie and a franchise that were direct offspring of this series. And one stars Sean William Scott and one stars John Cho. And that would be Dude, Where's My Car? And the Harold and Kumar movies. I think those would both be really fun to hit at one point. I wouldn't say Dude, Where's My Car is the great movie, but it is a fun movie. And I mean, Harold and Kumar, that's a great series. There's a lot of fun.
I have not seen any of those.
I do think without American Pie, chances are none of those movies would exist, or they would not be the same as they are. And that's partly because John Cho and Sean William Scott have this movie to thank for their careers, really. So, which a lot of these people can say. A lot of them had been around, but a lot of them, this was kind of their first gig. Chris Klein was one that this was kind of his first gig. A couple of them had, like Allison Hannigan was already doing Buffy. Tara Reid was in The Big Lebowski. Of course, Eugene Levy was already an established actor. He and Jennifer Coolidge are regulars of Christopher Guest. So there's some good stuff there. But yeah, there's some it's good times. So I guess that just about does. Or does anyone have any final thoughts on this particular installment?
It's going to be fun to go through the rest of these.
Well, it won't be the rest of them, but it'll be the core ones.
It'll be fun to go through the the ones that are worth the time.
Yeah,
I almost like to the good ones.
I've never seen the spin-offs one day.
I admit, I think that the first 4 are good. The 4 first spin-offs are guilty pleasure type movies. They can be enjoyable, and most of them have Eugene Levy in them, and that also puts a bright point. The last movie they put out, which I think was Girls' Rules, is probably one of the worst comedies I've ever seen. So,
That's saying something.
and I've seen some bad comedies. So I mean, for the most part, it's a mixed bag. But I mean, if you want something that's just a raunchy comedy that's not that great, but it's just dumb fun, the other 4 aren't bad.
And ultimately, again, with this one, we have a movie that definitely is not going to be for all tastes. It definitely has some painfully awkward comedy. It definitely has some things that push the limits of taste, and some things that, frankly, were illegal, probably even at the time. Not every aspect of it has aged well, but at the core of it, we have a coming-of-age story that's very honest about what people at that age are experiencing. And honestly, I, for one, find it refreshing to see movies that approach sex openly, because we are in a way too prudish a society, and violence all day long. But how dare you make a movie about sex? It's like, it's insane. But anyway, back to you, Dave.
Alrighty. Well, hopefully you ladies and gentlemen have enjoyed our discussion on American Pie, and but we're not done. So stay tuned for more. But let us know down in the comments what you thought of the movie, what you thought of our discussion, and we'll keep it interesting for you. But let's go around the room and tell you a little bit about who we are. Dustin, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, I have the Crypt of Horrors YouTube channel, which I think I'm going to finally rebrand into Cryptaxis, Crypt, or something of that nature, since my Twitter handle, Cryptaxis, is where I'm usually found, and Cryptaxis is also my Letterboxd account. I collect horror movie stuff, and I haven't been able to really do that for a while. So I've been having a real hard time trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to do now? And I still have some pickup videos I can make, but I'm going to try to do more like reviews or, other kinds of stuff going forward. So go subscribe to The Crypt of Horrors, which will hopefully have that cleaner, shorter name that's easier to remember very soon. And with that, I'm going to say goodnight.
Alrighty. How about you, Tammy? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
I go on this channel and another one and talk with everybody about the movies and their opinions, and check out movies I haven't seen before. And at this time of year, that's about it for right now. So. Okay.
Okay. Kim, if you're still here, why don't you tell them a little bit about yourself, if you have anything to plug?
Oh, she's not. She's gone.
Okay. Alrighty. Then I guess we'll go with you, Jake. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
I am Kotobukijake. I am the co-host of SeptumSin versus the World, a YouTube channel that focuses on physical media, and we are slowly wending our way towards a anime discussion on F, A Fairy Tale of the Two, but we're not there yet. One day. Meanwhile, I keep very busy, but I did not have to worry about my job today because we had a snow day, so that was kind of fun. I managed to get some writing done, so that I feel like it was still a productive day, and of course watching those bonus features for our discussion, which of course I always do try to make time to watch movies each week to join these fine folks. I wish I could find more time to watch movies on my own. Although my brother and I have been going through Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., just finished off season 3, and so that's pretty cool. Also just got back from a lengthy vacation about a week ago. I went on a post-Christmas, pre-New Year's trip down south and hit a bunch of beaches, and that was a really nice change of pace, and I kind of wish I could go back and do it more. But meanwhile, like I said, just keep busy,
Alrighty. Is that it then?
Yep.
Alrighty. Heading over to you, Brandon. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, first, if you want to support Kim, you can subscribe to her channel, Kim's Visual Diary. Of course, she would like that, especially with TikTok kind of being nuked on the 20th. As far as my own channel, I run SeptumSin versus the World. We have some movie stuff on. There's a new Anhedenia project episode Thursday. You can watch the space because my hope this year is to work on some reviews, and I'm hoping Wednesday to do kind of a Christmas haul video with Jake online. So we'll see how that goes too.
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty. Is that it then?
Yep, that's all I got running.
Alrighty. Well, my name is David Streggy. I'm one of the founding fathers of Inside Movies Galore. So thank you for coming along with us on this fantastic journey we've been having. We've started the new year basically, and we've got a whole ton of franchises that we're probably going to be going down the down the way and just discussing the hell out of them. So it's going to probably be an interesting year. Revisit some, whatnot, but other than that, I know I'm still working on a couple of anthologies on the side that I started a couple of years ago. Got about 3/4 of the way through the second one. We'll probably pick back up after I finish the music projects that Brandon here is helping me get out and on the way there. And but I do some moonlighting on a different channel called Delusions of Grandeur, where we also go on about various films and discuss with a different group that Tammy is also part of. And I do believe that this next Sunday I have chosen Joe's Apartment.
Fun one. That's one that Kim will never watch.
Tammy, we just talked about what a movie this last Sunday.
Batteries not included.
So I figured since we talked about a cutesy one in an apartment, I figured I'd talk about a cutesy little one in an apartment. So, but in any case, and if you think about it, the dude that stars in there is from Sliders. So, what gives? But anyways, I do some video pickups and some video reviews on the channel as well. I am planning a pickup video of some of the newer stuff that I've gotten. Just haven't gotten to that yet. But I think that's about it. So like, share, and subscribe. Oh, hey, Jessica Weber. I guess she's just saying hi, guys. So
Hi.
in any case, Like, share, subscribe, and we'll see y'all next week. Same time, same chat channel.
Yep.
Same that
Good
time,
piece.
same that channel.
Bye.
Everyone say good night.
Good night.
Good night.